This is Kevin and Carrie Kerr. They are members of Faith Fellowship, and they're here to give their testimony. First of all, I want to ask Kevin and Carrie if Faith Fellowship has their permission to use their testimony in the way that Faith Fellowship, like internet, DVDs, just stuff like that. Do we have your permission?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Well, here we go. I want to ask you guys, first of all, how long have you guys been attending Faith Fellowship?
February of 2010, I believe.
All right. That's good. Tell me a little bit about your all's family. Like your boys.
We're a family of 4. Me and Carrie and I have been married since August 2nd of '97. We have a 14-year-old son and a 6-year-old son.
Good. And what drew you guys to this church?
I almost wrecked into the sign.
We kind of joke around with Pastor Kelvin a lot that
It's a true
it was
story.
a sign. We were going down 12th Street, hit an icy patch, slid off the road, and the pastor's side door was almost touching the
He
sign.
couldn't have put a piece of paper between the door and the sign. That
Oh,
said
mercy.
Faith Fellowship. I said, well, there's our sign.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, I like that. Well, we're here to get your all's testimony. What year was it that you found out that Kevin had a medical issue? What was the medical issue?
It was October 14th of 2008. Or I'm sorry, 2010.
2010. What was the medical issue that?
He had several seizures, and I rushed him to Bailey's Hospital because we were working together. And I thought he had a stroke, and once they did MRIs and CAT scans and stuff, the doctor came back and said it wasn't strokes, that Kevin had an epidermoid brain tumor, and it was on his brain stem. So within 2 months of finding that out is when he had brain surgery.
Wow. So, Carrie, could you tell us what the process of why he was in the hospital, what happened, and how God helped you as his wife to get through the hard time that you was in the hospital with Kevin?
Yeah, the day that we found out that Kevin had this illness was a horrible, horrible day. They actually gave me a Valium at the hospital because we recently lost Kevin's dad to a brain tumor. What was it, like 2 months or something? 6 months prior to that, so it was very difficult. I was sick, cried, couldn't eat, couldn't take care of my kids. And we interviewed several surgeons and found a guy that was a really good surgeon. And so we went in, scheduled for surgery at, I think it was like 5 in the morning, 5:30 at Hillcrest on November 8th of 2010. And that was a really, really hard day. I got Kevin ready for surgery. I had to put pantyhose on him, which made it kind of funny. And they came back to get him, and there was a whole lot of part of me that said, no, this isn't the time. He can't go back for surgery. And I was bawling and pleading, Kevin, no, please don't have the surgery done. I just knew something wasn't going to be right. And so I feel guilty to this day, and I'm still angry at this day because I felt like I could have stopped it being his wife if I really wanted to. And he thought it was just me being close and attached to him, that I didn't want to see him do this. So he went ahead and went back. About every 30 minutes, I got a phone call from the anesthesiologist letting me know that Kevin's vitals were good, everything was good. And Hillcrest had a fire during Kevin's surgery. They evacuated Hillcrest. I hid upstairs. So they couldn't make me leave because I was so afraid to leave with Kevin being in surgery. If there was a fire, I was going to be in the room with him somehow. And that all got turned in fine. And after 12 hours, his surgeon walked out, and he said, I probably shouldn't tell you this. He said, but we lost Kevin 3 times during surgery and got him back, and he's not responding to the left side of his body. And I said, why is that? And he said, I don't know at this time. You know, he's still in recovery. Everything is so new. I just don't know. And I said, okay, can I go see him? And he said, absolutely. So he walked me to Kevin's room. And that was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my whole life. I walked in there and you couldn't even hardly see Kevin's eyes because he was so swollen. And he went to speak to me and he couldn't. He couldn't articulate. And they had to tie him down because he was so scared. He didn't know what was going on with his body. And I remember just crying and crying. And I walked out of his room and I said, did my husband have a stroke? And he said, no, absolutely not, no way, no how. And he said he'd be back in the morning to check on him to see where things were going at that point. But everything was just a touch and go. And so I guess it was probably 7 days. 7 days later, Kevin was still in the same process. He couldn't eat, he couldn't swallow, he couldn't talk, he couldn't set up, he couldn't do anything. And they took him to Bailey's hospital through an ambulance to get an MRI because he had to use what they call a yonker to suction out his mouth so he didn't drown on his own saliva. And so we got him transported to Bailey's, okay, and the MRI came back that afternoon, and the doctor came and seen me and said this in front of my kids and said that I'm sorry that I have to tell you this, but your husband had 3 brainstem strokes. He said, so unfortunately, he has a 10% survival rate, and he will never walk, talk, or eat again. And so it was really, I had to try to be really strong because I had my 10-year-old son there at the time, and that was really, really hard for me to do. And I never let anybody say that to Kevin. Kevin never knew what happened to him besides he had brain surgery. I would not let the doctor speak anything in his room about Kevin that was negative, or any relatives. I just didn't leave his side. And I always told Kevin that he's gonna, you know, we're gonna exercise and you're gonna do this and we're gonna get out of here and we're gonna go home and play with the kids. And he'd kind of look at me with that smile in his eyes. Or if he'd have an anxiety attack, I would sing to him. And I remember I prayed and I'd pray and I'd pray, but every day seemed like I was getting no results. So I thought, well, maybe I'm praying wrong. And I know that probably sounds dumb, but I just didn't know. So I went down to the gift shop and I bought a prayer book. And I remember sitting in that chair all hours of the night reading it out loud. And I got so much response out of Kevin from reading that book. I read it front to back. I don't even know how many times, dozens of times. And he seemed like he was starting to progress and do a lot better. And he ended up getting abused in the hospital by a nurse. And he did not get his right medication. His meds ran out at midnight. Instead of reordering his meds, she gave him a different patient's meds. So his respiratory system completely dropped, and the doctor came in and said, we're going to have to put your husband on life support. And I said, no, you're not. I said, you're going to give me an hour. And he said, okay, that's up to you. And so I climbed in bed with him and pleaded, bawled, begged, anything you can think of, I did for him to keep saying, Kevin, open your eyes, please breathe, please breathe. And his stepmom, Debbie Kerr, which attends this church as well, came in really flustered, and she said, I just got your message. And I said, well, what do you mean? I didn't call you. And she said, no, you just texted me. And I said, no, I would have never texted you. I'm laying in bed with Kevin, and I didn't even have my phone. And she pulled her cell phone out, and it said, God needs you here now.
Wow.
And she brought a cloth up that Brother Wright and all the church members prayed on up front for Kevin's healing. And she gave it to me and said, can I give it to Kevin? And I said, please do. He has to breathe. I'm so afraid I'm going to lose my husband. I can't do this. And so I put it in his hand, and I closed his hand. And I said, Kevin, you need to breathe. and he would just close his eyes and go back to sleep, and I'd wake him up, and we'd do this over and over, and he would put it in my hand, and he'd close my hand together, and I'd put it back in his, and we'd go back and forth, and I said, no, honey, you're confused, you need to breathe. I said, you have to do this, we have kids, I need you, and he looked at me, and he took both hands, which he can't do with this one yet, just like this, and he said, you believe, plain as day. That was the first word he spoke to me in over 6 months. So that's what this tattoo is for, to always remind me I have to believe. And I got that for his birthday, actually. But so at that moment, his stepmom I thought was going to kick me because I didn't know what to say or do. And I looked at Kevin, and I just started bawling, and I said, I believe, Kevin, I believe. And I was hugging him and telling him how much I loved him. And I knew at that moment we were fine. Everything was going to be okay. And within 4 hours, I actually ate that day because I didn't eat for weeks. And they'd have to take my vitals and give me my own hospital room. And because I was so afraid to eat because he couldn't. And I would just cry because I thought it was unfair for me to eat if he couldn't. And I remember my mother-in-law, she took me to Olive Garden. And I remember sitting there eating, and I just laughed and laughed, and we smiled and laughed, and it was like the best day of my whole life. But within 4 hours, he was at 100% of oxygen, had no machines, was sitting up in bed and talking to me.
Amen.
So it was absolutely amazing. And we had, I don't even know how many doctors and surgeons walked into our room that day. And said, what did you do? What did you tell him? What did you do? And I said, I didn't do anything. It was my God.
Amen.
And you kind of get the looks because doctors are what they say, you know. They go to school and pay a lot of money to do what they do. But so Kevin was doing amazing from that point, and then we got transferred to Specialty Hospital, which is across from Hillcrest, and we went to ICU there. And he was doing good and exercising and getting better. And I looked down at his leg, and he had a shiny spot on his leg. And I said, well, that doesn't look right. So I asked the nurse, no, it's fine, no, it's fine. And it just kept eating at me and eating at me. And so this went on for 4 days until that's all I thought about was his leg. And I never seen his doctor. No, his doctor never came to see us anymore. He pretty well just wrote him off. And so it was me using Google and God and my Bible for everything. And I went into the hallway, and I'm a pretty shy person, so it's not like me. But I started screaming and throwing a fit and crying so somebody would hear me. And a nurse practitioner named Jane, which we're really good friends with now, came up to me, and she said, baby, what is wrong? And I said, something is wrong with my husband's leg, and nobody will listen to me. And she said, well, we'll take a look at it. So she came in, and she said, well, I think everything's fine. I think it's because he's not using it. She said, but I'll order an ultrasound for it in the morning. And I said, no, I want it now. And she said, okay, it's your call. I'll go get it now. She came in within 30 minutes with an ultrasound, and a different tech did his ultrasound, and it was about 45 minutes after then, I guess. They got the results back, and Jane walked into Kevin's room, and as soon as she opened that door, the look on her face was just not good. And she was crying. I've never seen a doctor or nurse cry for another patient, and she did. She walked in bawling, and I automatically just started bawling because I just knew the worst. And she walked up to Kevin and held his hand, and she said, your wife just saved your life. And Kevin said, what do you mean? And she said, you had a blood clot in your groin the size of a baseball that would have went to your heart and killed you that night. And God put that in my spirit. I seen it without seeing it. And I waited till that 4th day and had all I could because of God, which was truly amazing. And so they rushed him over to radiology at Hillcrest within 10 minutes of speaking to Jane. And now he's got a green line filter that runs from his neck all the way to his ankle. It's got mesh in it, so any blood clots, it'll just kind of break through there because he was allergic to heparin. And the result of that is his body filled up with nothing but blood clots. And so that was another miracle from God that did that for us. And so he always tells me that I'm his hero. and we laugh about it.
She's my angel.
He got me an
Yeah.
angel necklace for Christmas, actually, because he says I'm his guardian angel. And we ordered, he passed the swallow test on the 7th try. We just kept pushing and trying, and they kept saying, no, we're not ordering anymore, we're going to give him a trach, and no, you're not traching him. And I would get into so many arguments with them because nobody would listen to me. And they said, so you're refusing this being his wife, because I had all rights for his medical, and I said, I'm refusing everything. And I started refusing medication because he was so doped up. He couldn't try to work on himself because he was so medicated. And so I started refusing all that, and then he would look at me where I could see it was Kevin. And then I remember when he could finally speak to me, he would tell me that he felt like he was being overdosed. So I was right in God giving me that he was being overdosed, and we needed to quit this medication. And we ordered Chinese food one night.
Before you get into that, and while I was still in specialty, God placed 2 people into our paths, Mr. and Mrs. C, that went to Kaiser Rehab, where I eventually started going, and God uses people for their tools and uses them to help do His work. And I went into Kaiser Rehab, where I started becoming, at least using a wheelchair, to eventually walking with a walker, to walking with a cane. And now on the 22nd of this month, I'll be 400 days with no cane.
Amen. Yes. Amen.
And I tell my testimony to a lot of people, and most anybody that will listen to me. And I always refer back to Philippians 4:13, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The important part is not strength just here. It's strength in here, and in here, and in here, and also in here. And that's how I got to go to rehab. I'll go with your rehab story.
I like that.
Oh, okay. We ordered Chinese food one night because Kevin was so tired of hospital food. You know, it was like 8 months later or whatever, and it was just a nasty cafeteria food. They had really good grilled cheese and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, though.
It's hard to mess up a grilled cheese sandwich,
So,
though.
And we called Mazzio's and Pizza Hut, and it was when they had the real bad snow, and nobody was working or delivering. And we called this Chinese place, and the guy, there's 2 different double glass doors to get in at night for security. And Kevin was sitting in his wheelchair, and I was standing next to him waiting for the guy to come in. And so he come to the door, and I went through the double glass to let him in. And it wasn't the normal person to deliver, because he was just, they mostly have Asian people to deliver, and this guy wasn't this night. So it was like, oh, okay, you know. And I walked out there, and he handed me the food, and he was standing at an angle where he could just look, and all he was doing was staring at Kevin. Would not take his eyes off of Kevin. And I kept looking at Kevin, and he would look at me with like, why is this guy staring at me, you know? And he said, is that your husband? Or no, he said, that's your husband. Everything I went to say, he said it before I did. He said, Kevin, he said that he's the same age as he was. He said, Kevin's 32. And I was just looking at Kevin and looking at this guy, and I'm like, how does he know all this, you know? And it was just so bizarre. And he said, can I please go pray with him? And I said, yes, will you please? He said, absolutely. So I let him through the door, and Kevin's like kind of scared at this point. You know, who's this guy and why is he coming over here? And I said, honey, this guy wants to pray for you. He said, okay. So he grabbed a hold of Kevin's hand and started praying. But when he was praying, he said he was praying for the left side of his body. He was praying for cranial nerve damage on his 6th and 7th nerve. And this guy would have never known that, ever. And I didn't tell him any of this. And that's only medical terms that a stranger knew. And then he started speaking in tongues, and I just can't even tell you how amazing this guy was. And when he got done, he said, now what can you can do something, what can you do that's different? Well, Kevin moved his hand. It was the first time he ever moved his hand.
awesome.
And so we always said that. And I said, he's like, well, why are you crying? Why is everybody, you know? And I'm like, they said you would never do this, Kevin. They said you would never eat or talk, you know? And he's like, really? He's so wrong. And I'm like, I know. So right now he's actually learning to run. We're at a really fast-paced walk, and which to me is I'm running to chase him because his feet are so big. I told him he's got Frankenstein feet. And
one of my long-term goals is to do the Tulsa Fun Run next year.
And that's what we're gonna do together.
It's you could walk or walk fast or jog or run.
And you can pause.
And I can pause. You know, I don't have to do a constant run, but I can, you know, jog or walk real fast. And if I need to, I can sit down. And if I don't need to, I can keep going.
Yep.
And that's a goal that I have set, and I know with God holding my hand, we're going to do it together.
Yeah, I agree.
But God heals his body every day. When I brought him home, he was cross-eyed. And I don't know if any of you guys remember that at church. But he was cross-eyed, and if you look at him now, God's healed that.
Yeah.
And he's no longer cross-eyed. He's got perfect vision. He's getting more movement in his toes. And he can kick really good with his leg when he wants to.
I can play a pretty mean game of kickball.
He can. And he's getting more movement in his arm and his hand. He's isolating his fingers now.
I just got the return feeling back in my hand to where for what would you say, about 6 months, I've been able to squeeze real tight with this hand.
Oh,
I've been able to squeeze real tight, but up here,
breaking your fingers.
I didn't know how tight I was squeezing. I didn't know if I was crushing a steel bar or if I was barely making a marshmallow move. But a little over a month ago,
you were praying for Marcine.
I was praying for Marcine, and I was talking to Tom, and I was showing him that I could squeeze with this hand, and I wrapped my arm around him. I just started crying. He said, "What is wrong?" I said, "Nothing at all." I said, "I can feel how hard I'm squeezing your hand."
Wow.
So now I'm able to judge, you know, if I grab a styrofoam cup with this hand, I'm able to judge how much I need to hold it or how much I need to crush it.
Right. Wow.
It's amazing.
It is.
I wake
God's
up.
done a lot of amazing things.
I wake up every morning and thank God for the healing in my body and the continued healing to line my body up with His Word the way He meant me to be. And I give God all the glory and praise for everything, not just the healing or what has happened to me. You know, every gift that I have a roof over my head, I have food in my house, I have a wonderful family, a very beautiful wife, and all good things come from above.
Amen.
So everything I have to be thankful for, I thank God for.
Yes. Jesus, that's wonderful.
Most people always say, "Oh, I'm so sorry you guys have this," and I'm like, don't ever be sorry for me. I wake up every morning with a husband and 2 kids. I have my life. You know, I'm happy. Don't be sorry for me.
I wake up every morning
my husband is healed. He's walking and talking, and you know.
I wake up every morning a couple minutes before she does, and I usually sit up on the side of the bed, and I have my first conversation with God, and then I start singing.
He does.
I start
dances
singing
me out of bed.
our praise and worship team songs. Every morning, I'll start bouncing on the bed singing,
and she'll say, I can sleep.
She'll say, "Honey, I need to sleep a little bit longer." I said, "Nope, I've already started singing."
I'm like, oh no.
Well, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful testimony. It shows what God can really do when you really stand on His Word, even when we're fearful in our heart. I mean, God understands that we're human beings because He's the one that created us, and He knows the feelings that we go through, and that He loved, that He honored a godly woman and a godly wife to honor her husband because she didn't turn her back on her husband, just like God wouldn't turn His back on us.
Right.
And that's what He showed her, is that He never turned His back on her because she never turned her back on you.
Right.
And it's wonderful that what God will. That blesses me, you know, and it blesses me to see the unity you guys got and the way your boys are. They're well good boys. I mean, Michael, what is he, 13, 14?
14.
He's a full-grown man already, you
I
know,
know
body-wise, but yet he shows love and respect to his parents, you know what I'm saying? And you guys are doing a wonderful thing. And I remember when you all first come in, you know, I didn't know that much about you. I mean, I heard about you guys when I knew you was going into surgery, and then I heard what happened, you know, and you know, I didn't know you that well, but I said a casual prayer here and there, you know, because I didn't know you guys until, like I know you guys now, you know, now you guys are personal friends of mine. But, you know, and then when I first seen you guys come in and I met who Kevin was, and he had always had a beautiful spirit about it. Both of you did. You was kind of quiet, but Kevin is kind of an outgoing kind of guy.
Right.
But the more you got to know you and him, you know, you can see the love that Carrie you have for one another, and to see the love that you both have for Christ. You know, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And you guys are still living it and walking it and preaching it, and not you guys haven't changed one single bit. You know, you just got stronger in the Lord. You guys have gotten better. You know, and I think it's a wonderful thing. And I'm glad to be a part of your family too, because we're all a part of God's family. And you know, you guys got a beautiful family as husband and wife, and you got a beautiful family what God's bringing here at this church.
Right.
Because without you guys, it wouldn't be Faith Fellowship. With you know, because that's how we make a family. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So I'm glad to call you my friends, and I know you do the same. And it's wonderful to see what God's doing and still doing. And he ain't quit working on you, and the thing is, you ain't quit growing in him, you know?
Yeah, every day something new happens. Whether it's me moving one finger at a time, or whether it's I can smile now on this side.
I like that.
I got muscle movement over here again, or whether it's being able to walk without my brace on, which I've been doing a lot of.
Wow.
Every day
It's just baby steps.
is another blessing, another healing in my body that I thank God for.
Amen.
The way I look at it is God uses people as tools to help everyone. And yes, he uses doctors, but doctors can only take you so far. It's all about faith and believing.
Yeah.
You have to believe without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, yeah, that's what it's
Have
about.
to.
Exactly.
And through this testimony right here of mine, I told you before, Ernie, that if I'd have walked out of the hospital like I walked in, I would most likely, was what I think that doctor did a really good job. But what testimony would I have?
Right.
God is doing great things in my life. Not only physically, but spiritually, and in my heart and in my mind.
Just like at the hospital, I used to push him in the snow in his wheelchair, and it was a nightmare. I'd have to run off like E.T. to get him into Hillcrest, because we'd go to church, and we would be the only people that would show up. But we would have an awesome time, wouldn't we? And it would just be us and the pastor. But to get to church in that wheelchair was just almost impossible some days, but we still did it.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a true blessing talking to my brothers and sisters in the Lord, and it even blesses me more to know personally what you guys went through and still believed. You know, didn't give up when people said that, you know, they looked at what they saw physically, and what they saw physically was right, but you look past the physical part and you look through what God sees through, and He's seen the healed Kevin. That's what He's seen, and that's what your wife's seen. And you're a blessed man and you're a blessed woman. So I'm glad to call you my friends. Once again, thank you for you taking your time out and sharing this testimony. I know it's going to be a blessing to somebody. I know it will. So thank you guys.
You're
Thank
very
you,
welcome.
Ernie.